My name is Diane King, and I come to you from Toronto, Canada. Our visit brought us here to meet and get to know a number of the German survivors of Allied atrocities. Today we have Teresa, or Rese, Haug, and we are going to learn her story as well. Welcome, Teresa. How are you?
I'm fine.
Thank you for joining us. Would you please tell us a little of your background and where you from and when, and how the historical events affected your life, what were they, and so on.
Okay. I was born in Vršac, or Vršac, Yugoslavia, in 1927. And I grew up in Vršac. I went to school there till 1941, when the Germans occupied Yugoslavia. And that was around a few days before Easter, 1941. And I just had finished 3 years of Serbian high school when they came in, and then we got high school in German. Our teachers and professors fixed up that we could have a German high school. And then we changed again all our lives. The first four years was a German public school. The next 3 years was basic language Serbian, a high school, or the gymnasium as they call it. And then again, the Germans came in, we had a German high school. But that was a private one. Our parents had to pay for that. But in 1941, before the Germans came in, there was already a discussion and a threat that they're gonna eliminate us, or to kill us, or to do something, because I was born in a village about 14 kilometers from the city I lived in now. And I recall my parents standing in front of the door, house door, and talk with some other friends, what we gonna do to fence our family. And one lady said, oh, we use some things what we use for washing, that's acid. And we use that for defense. And then my father said, no, they would throw our children in there. And
wow.
They had already threatened that the village I was born in was a German village with about 3 Hungarian families. And the rest was all German, that they will burn the village and color the Easter eggs with it.
That's what you were told the Germans were going to do when they came?
No, the Serbians would do it before the Germans come in.
Oh, a preemptive
because
strike,
they didn't know that, we didn't know that the Germans are coming.
Okay, so they were, the Serbians were threatening you.
They were threatening us.
Okay.
And then, and they colored the Easter eggs with it, but then luckily the Germans came in just before Easter. And I recall when they came in, they went through the city. There was no fight that they had. There were no soldiers to defend the cities, but the Germans just marched in. And the only thing I recall, I was then about 14, that they laughed and they were singing. There was nothing.
No violence.
No violence, nothing at all. And in actual fact, I would say it was the whole time when we were occupied, it was peaceful in our area, because I guess too many different nationalities, and it was not like in the mountains in Serbia that we had partisans or anything there. So we didn't have the problem. The only thing I recall was in some ways nicer, because I recall as an 8-year-old child that I was at my grandfather's in the village, and during the night the dog was barking like crazy. And I went to my grandfather and said if he wouldn't go out and see what's out there. And he says, no, I won't go out to get my head bashed in. And what it was, the next day we found 2 houses from us, gypsies were there and they stole horses. They got the tools at my grandfather's in the back out of the shed, and then they went 2 houses farther and stole the horses.
Oh my goodness.
And that was prior to the Germans, naturally. And then after that, it was peaceful. We didn't have that problem anymore.
Isn't that amazing?
When
Germans brought law and order with them.
it was quiet. I don't even see that we have any special orders or the laws. I mean, we could go out in the evening. I know we had from school, we were allowed to get dance lessons, and I run at night. One of the boys wanted to take me home, but I didn't want it, so I ran by myself home.
Right.
And it was after midnight, and it was safe.
That's amazing. So how long did this last?
That lasts till about October 1944.
Then what happened?
And then on Sunday, we hear that the Russians and the partisans are already 14 kilometers from us. That's my birth village. And the next morning at 8 o'clock, they start the street fights. But all we had to defend the city were about 27 soldiers, and 2 of our 14-year-old boys went with the soldiers and fought. 1 got shot, that we know. And on Tuesday morning, then I found a dead man, a dead German soldier, right in the middle of our intersection, laying there. And to talk about the feelings, what we had that time, is very hard now in retrospect to say how we felt. But from that day on, we had every night somebody bangs at the door, the partisans, and they went from house to house, and not just once, they came maybe 2-3 times. It took me practically about 30 years that I could sleep alone in the house.
Because it's what would they do when they came knocking on the door?
They came to go through the house under the excuse that they look for German soldiers. But I was one of the lucky ones, it seems, because I could speak the language fluently. And I never had any problem. My mom just said I was white like a wall, but I was cold. I never showed any fear. And then on 2 weeks after, on an afternoon, they shot about, well, that time I heard there were 113 people, a woman and a 13-year-old son. What they did in that time, they picked up the old men, because there were no young men there.
Right.
They picked the old men off the wagons when they came in with the grapes. It was a time when the grapes
Harvesting.
were harvesting, yeah. They picked them off the wagon. I remember a neighbor, her husband was picked off too. They were mostly about 70 years old. And they picked them off, and then 14 days after, they shot them all about 2 blocks from my house, and I saw them going by the house, the naked bodies.
Were these the partisans that were doing the shooting, or the Russians had left them in place when they were moving further?
No, the partisans.
The partisans were?
The partisans
Okay.
did that. I mean, there was, in between, there was raping from the partisans, even right from the Russians.
Right.
Because we had a neighbor, she was about 8 months pregnant. She got raped, and her husband was tied too and had to watch how she got
yes.
raped. And a young woman the same, in the same condition, and she was raped, but they both survived.
Okay.
And then on the 18th of November in the morning, about 8 o'clock, a man went by with a drum. And in a half an hour we had to be out, and we were allowed to take with us what we can carry. And I mentioned to my mom we should have a bread with us, because without food we don't know. Luckily we got a bread and then some lard, I think, that we had something to eat. And then we went, we had big buildings where they made soldiers, whatever they had in there before. and we were put in there, and then it's about the 3 days after, or was it 2 days after, we all got taken out and we are marching to another place, and that was a village, I don't know how far it was. It was called Mariana oder Zitschedorf, and we went there and we stayed there, and we had to go to work. The partisans came and called us, and we had to go to work in the fields and do things. The same was at home too. We had to go to the city hall, and then they picked out people to go to work, and some had really awful things to do. They had to clean the toilets with their hands, you know, and we didn't have flush toilets in that time. They were outhouses, things like that. And in Mariolana, we stayed there till the 22nd of December, and we had to go back to our city. And that's a march, must be about 30 kilometers, something like that. And we were put again in like a camp, and they picked out the people, girls and women and boys, which were about from 18 till 35, and they were sent to Russia. And they didn't get enough, so they went for the younger ones. So my turn came too, and my mom went with me, because she was already older than 35, so she went, or 34, she went with me. And we were put in the animal trains, what they have, the freight trains, where they take the cows and things. We were put in 40 in one, and I can't recall if we got anything to eat from them. I would have to lie. But I know we came through Romania, and in what they call the city of Timișoara, or the Timișoara in German, and my mom called out to some people who came to the train if they know certain people. We had relatives there. And mom asked them to bring us food. So they brought us some smoked sausages and some bread, so that we had something to eat. And then for going to the toilet, we had a hole in the train. But on the way, we were put in a bigger freight train, and then we were 80 in one of those. They had made like bunk beds, one floor and then on top. And then during the trip, it broke down and fell on my mom, and then we had a iron stove in there, or an oven, where we could heat a little bit. And then when we stopped, we got some water, and then we came to the Ukraine. We went past Odessa and Dnipropetrovsk, and then we were taken out of the train and put in an open train. There was snow in there, open one, and a few kilometers we went with that, and then it was awfully cold. That was we left on the 29th, no, that's the first transport, went on the 29th, we went on the 6th of January, our train went. And so it was cold, and then in the Ukraine was snow and very cold, and we had to walk then after that for about 3 kilometers. But mom was sick, the iron stove fell on her too during the trip. So what we had on clothing, and so we had to dump, because I had to look that my mom could walk through the snow. And then we came in Kajievka. That was an old building. I don't know what they had in there, but they made like bunk beds, but they were all in a row. And then, but the wood was green, and we didn't have anything on it. So till they got us some sacks with straw to sleep on, and that was then our first day in there. In the Kajievka in Russia, in the Ukraine.
Okay. You haven't, have you reached your destination at this point?
That point was.
That's where
Zambia.
they were sending you?
That's where they send us, and that's where I stay over 2 years.
Okay, that was one of the, that was a gulag. There was a prison camp? Or?
It was a prison camp. I don't know. We didn't call it gulag.
No, they didn't. Probably not. They probably
I
called it
didn't
gulag
even-
in Siberia, but
We didn't even know that what it is because
it was a prison camp.
A
for you.
prison camp, you know, and they were. Our youngest was a little boy from Prussia. I don't know where they picked him up. He was 11 years old.
Mhm.
And then we had from us, we had a few girls with 16, and then we had from Germany, I don't know where they got them, that they brought them there.
Yeah.
We had twins. They were a year younger than I.
Was this supposed to be a work camp?
A work camp.
You're supposed to work for the Russians in some
Oh
capacity.
yeah, I'm a trained bricklayer.
Okay, so they wanted you to do that
And
there?
we had to, part of us worked in the coal mines. And the other part worked on upground. We built, on the coal mine, we built a building. We had 3 months training, and then we had to produce about 3 cubic a day, each bricklayer.
I see.
And there was not a stop in the wintertime. We had to do it in the wintertime
Right.
or in the summertime. We worked out with 30 below and 40 below. The only day we could go home was when it was 60 below. That was the only day.
Is this centigrade or Fahrenheit?
That's
Centigrade.
centigrade.
Okay.
I have to think now you said centigrade because I say Celsius, so that's
I think, yes, that's, okay, thank you. And so you were doing this for 2 years.
2 years, but then in the first year that was, Mom was then sick the whole time.
Right.
She was about 78 pounds the whole time through. And then it was the first or the second month somebody died where she was sleeping because she was in a so-called sick room. And then I asked a young man to help me to take the dead one out because Mom was laying right on top and on
Right.
the bunk. And then the first few months, it seems we survived quite well, even though with very little food. We had in the morning our black coffee, which wasn't real coffee, but coffee.
Right.
And then we got for nothing the whole day. In the evening we got then a sauerkraut soup or a pickle soup. And sometimes in the springtime they had red beet soup. And there we got about a half a liter. And sometimes we were lucky. Something was cooked in there which looked like meat, but we didn't see the meat. And for the second we got a spoon, either barley or the rice, whatever they had, but just a tablespoonful, and that was our meal. Our bread we got later, that was a dark bread, heavy and wet. It was more from the outer shell of the wheat, you know, when they make it. And we couldn't sleep till we had the bread, and we were so hungry that we ate it up, and then we had to wait till next night to get something in the stomach again, which fills us a little bit. And the dying didn't start, it started in the springtime when the people started dying, but mostly first the man.
Really? Okay.
The man died first. That we had the first year in the summer about 5 to 6 people every day who died because of the nourishment, the food, and the man need more food than the
That's
woman,
right.
and that's just calmed them down.
They didn't seem to be concerned about the lack of workers. Were they continually supplying, replacing those who died?
We have been replaced twice. Once we got from another camp 104 young men, and then after that we got 168 from the coal mines of Upper Silesia. We called them Peronias because they couldn't speak a German and they couldn't speak a Polish. We called them water Polish.
Okay.
because they couldn't speak
Right.
one language really. And
How did you, okay, you're going through this for 2 years. How'd you get out?
I really can't say. My mom was released in September.
So she survived that.
She was, they cleared up, first of all, when we came, they separated half of us, and half of us went into another camp. And we stayed in that camp. And then in the next year, they took some people who were sick. But I was lucky I could keep my mom with me. Somehow, I don't know how and who helped, but my mom could stay with me. And then they went into another camp where they said the sick ones have it easier, but they worked in a different, not in the mines or so. Well, and in September 46, they released my mom, but she went towards Germany. In another camp, some friends of us were released, but I hear that afterwards, and they were sent back to Yugoslavia. And a friend of mine, she was pregnant from her fiancé. She was already talked. He came from home with her there, and she was sent back into a concentration camp in Yugoslavia itself, and she lost that child there. And then she escaped through Hungary and Austria. Then she escaped to Austria, and then she came to Chicago.
But you were actually released. You and your mom were released.
My mom was released. I was the year after released.
And she went back to...
No, she went to... My mom went to Germany, and in Germany they sent her to a nursing home. Okay. And from the nursing home, I could still remember the address of my uncle. And my uncle lived in Berlin. He took my mom to himself,
Okay.
To Berlin. And when I came...
So you went to Berlin after you got out then?
Not quite.
That's what I thought. So
Not
how did
quite.
you know they were there?
Oh, I found out.
Okay.
I came to Frankfurt on the Oder, and then in Hoyerswerda we were in a quarantine, and I met a Prussian girl from East Prussia, and her and I, we went over the fence and got ourselves a job at the farmers, because they took our people again, the dismantled machinery, they sent to Russia.
Right.
So we went, and I got a place at the farmer. But when I was still in the camp, I looked through the books and find out where they sent my mom, and that my uncle took her. So I wrote to my uncle, and he came when I was at the farmers, and he said, when your month is over, you come to Berlin. So I went to Berlin, but I didn't get no ration card. I got 350 grams of bread a day and a soup. So I couldn't stay with my uncle and my mom because they had just the minimum what the ration cards was. I don't know what they had in that time. So I got myself a job at people in Berlin. They had a grocery store. And they had 3 children, so I was working with them, because in the meantime we had found my father, who was in the American prison of war, and my brother was in the English one. And they were already together in Germany, in Bavaria. When my father was in Bavaria in one of the Eisenhower camps, but they picked up the people who came from Yugoslavia, and they wanted to send them back to Yugoslavia, but maybe it came out that the other ones they sent, that they got killed and put in concentration camps. So they did.
At some point, did all of you, because we've got to kind of wrap it up
Yeah.
now, did all of you make it to Canada, or was it just you?
Just me. My brother came, but he went back.
Did your uncle and dad, if I got that correct, survive the Eisenhower camps?
My father was released because they wanted to send him back to Yugoslavia. My
That's
uncle
right.
was never a soldier,
Okay.
so
Okay.
he was never
So he
there.
should never have been there, right?
No.
Okay.
Then, no, my father was released from there, but Bavaria, they were dividing them in small villages. So when we got the permission to come to West Germany, my mother and I, we came then to my father, who had found my brother already, and we were together. My grandmother never made it because when the partisans came in, she was beaten and she died of the beating. About 3 months after she was dead, and my grandfather starved because they made out of my birth village another concentration camp. They took the people out from one side and put it in one corner, and on the other side they had the partisans in there.
That sounds extremely rough. We're just very glad. Thank you. We do want to thank you for telling the story, and I'm very happy to have met you, and I look forward to hearing some more, because I'm sure there's a lot more to tell as well.
But in short, I can tell when I came then to West Germany.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that. It's a long recovery.
Oh yeah, but
And,
then I had, in that time in Germany, in actual fact, I wanted to go back to school, but then Mom was sick, Dad was sick, I was sick. I was sick for 6 months after because I had stomach ulcers. They said it's the nerves. I don't know if it was the nerves, but it could be.
Sure.
And so then after I got married and came to Canada.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's good to meet you, Rese. And this is Diane King with League of Extraordinary Revisionists, and thank you for joining us. Thank you.
You're welcome.